Welcome to the Provincial Forum on K-12 Education, hosted by, in alphabetical order, the Manitoba Association of Parent Councils, the Manitoba Association of School Business Officials, the Manitoba Association of School Superintendents, the Manitoba School Boards Association, and the Manitoba Teachers Society. I am Michele Polinuk, and I was invited by the hosts, with approval from the forum participants, to serve as moderator for today's forum. The format for today's forum is quite straightforward. Each party will receive exactly 2 minutes to make an opening and closing statement. In total, 5 questions will be asked during the course of the afternoon of the forum. Each of the hosting partners has developed one question. From the perspective of their membership, these questions reflect significant policy priorities as Manitoba heads into the upcoming fall provincial general election. Each party will be provided with precisely 2 minutes to respond to each question. Following the responses, each party will then have 1 minute for rebuttals. That's why I'm here. It's hard to remember. 2 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, that's my job. As moderator, I humbly request each participant observe these time limits. I will, of course, grant leeway for you to finish your response. However, I shall intervene with a school bell where a response clearly exceeds the time allowance. These procedures were clearly communicated to each party in advance of the forum. With all of that said, I am pleased to introduce today's participants in alphabetical order by surname. They are Mr. Nello Altomare, Manitoba New Democratic Party. Next up, Mr. Wayne Ewasko, Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party, and Dr. Jon Gerrard, Manitoba Liberal Party. Gentlemen, as you are aware, the order in which each party will make opening and closing statements, as well as the order in which each party will respond and rebut each question, was determined literally by rolling the dice in advance of the forum. So we will now begin with the 2-minute opening statements, and we will start with Mr. Ewasko.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks everybody, and welcome here. And the big first thing I want to mention to everybody is thank you. Thank you to everybody who has put your name on a ballot to become elected as a trustee. I am more than thrilled to be here representing Premier Heather Stefanson, or Heather Stefanson, in the Progressive Conservative Party. I was selected to represent the Progressive Conservative Party today in today's proceedings. As a former educator myself, I hope that everyone here got onto the education sector because they had the desire to help children reach their full potential, no matter where they live, their cultural background, or their own personal circumstance. All of us here should have a student-centered approach. Our government has 3 major priorities for K-12 education in Manitoba. They are improving literacy and numeracy, and Indigenous education and inclusion. The former NDP government had no plan to improve student outcomes for Manitoba children, and our government has implemented the K-12 Commission, the first royal commission that has been done on education since 1959. Out of that commission, we came forward with the K-12 Action Plan. This commission and the K-12 Action Plan came out of the result of having consultations and collaboration meetings with over 30,000 Manitobans. The K-12 Action Plan has 4 pillars for student success: high-quality learning, student engagement and well-being, excellence in teaching and literacy, and leadership, responsive systems, and in order for students to thrive, they need a well-funded education system. I know that both my friends on this stage I know what they're going to say, but I'm happy to correct any record that's going to be coming on, and that has been said in the last few weeks and the few years. Our government has come to...
Finish the sentence.
You're grabbing the bell. Okay, so you're grabbing the bell, Michelle, at what time?
Now.
She's grabbing the bell at now. So I'm going to finish the sentence and say, this year alone, $100 million in astronomical funding to the K-12 system, a 6.1% increase. I know you're not happy with my thesaurus, but it's good.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Mr. Ewasko. Next up, opening statement from Dr. Gerrard.
First of all, a big thank you to all of you who are school trustees. You have a challenging and important job. In 2021, when school boards were dismissed as not important and your very jobs were threatened, Manitoba Liberals held a number of forums, and we were the first with signs saying no to Bill 64, eventually putting up more than 1,000. We're very pleased that the decision to abolish school boards was reversed. School boards are critical. Thank you for being a part of that fight. We salute you and we thank you. Manitoba has an excellent four-year high school graduation rate of over 90% for non-Indigenous youth in Manitoba. Sadly, a four-year graduation rate for Indigenous youth is much lower, just over 50%. And sadly, there's been little increase in the Indigenous graduation rate in 2 decades of NDP and PC governments. In our view, if we're to improve as a province, we need to have a major focus on children who are falling through the cracks. This starts with addressing the low graduation rate for Indigenous students. Another group who have low graduation rates are children in the care of Manitoba's Child and Family Services. It's not acceptable. A third group of children who are too often falling through the cracks are children who fall in the category of being neurodiverse. And within this category, particularly children with learning disabilities. Learning disabilities are one of the most common of disabilities. And we know children and youth with learning disabilities can accomplish extraordinary things when they're helped. Winston Churchill had one. Without early diagnosis and help, they can have lifelong struggles. I'm on a campaign now to get better attention and better support for children with learning disabilities, so we no longer have so many of these children falling through the cracks. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Dr. Gerrard. Now we'll turn to Mr. Altomare.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you, everybody, for the invitation to be here today. It is such a pleasure to be in a room filled with educators and people that care about kids in this province and the future of this province. I just want to thank you for that. I also want to thank the participants that are with me here on the stage. This is an important topic, one that requires careful, thoughtful, and proactive debate so that we can provide the necessary resources for our kids, our families, and our communities. What could be better than that? That's why you're here. You're here serving your kids, your families, and your communities, and you do it every day. And you've been doing that this past 7 years with the challenges that have been thrown in front of you. Challenges that you had really very little control over. Challenges that were unnecessary, calling into question your very existence. Calling into question people that are willing to put the time in to support their kids, families, and communities. I will tell you right now, we are at an inflection point where we're really going to see how serious are we going to take the education of our youth. Because our jobs as educators, you know what it is to put kids on that pathway to success and to have every resource available so that they can do it. And what you really need a partner in the provincial government that's going to walk that path with you. And I will say to you, I take great pride in telling you I started my career 33 years ago as a teacher at John Gunn Middle School for the Transcona Springfield School Division. And I will also say that I have my high school friend, elementary school friend who's a trustee in the Lord Selkirk School Division, who feels like everyone in this room, the importance of the work that you do and the absolute pleasure and
Great word to finish with.
I do get to finish
you
my
finish your
sentence?
sentence, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Apparently.
Not only the pleasure, but also the honor to represent your communities. Thank you.
We will now be moving to the questions. So the questions were also randomly selected in terms of the order, and we're starting with the first question coming from MSBA. There's a little bit of background information prior to the question. For many years, MSBA and community partners have agreed that protecting fiscal autonomy for local school boards has remained an important guiding principle. Everyone from municipalities to chambers of commerce agree that it remains absolutely critical that boards have discretion to support programs that are tailored to the needs and character of their community. In 2023, the Manitoba government announced a further step towards repealment of education property taxes. With this step, our long advocated for and split of revenue share is now fact, with 20% of operating funding still coming from community investment in their schools. The question: if elected as government, will you protect fiscal autonomy for all school boards? And what are your plans for ensuring that the local voices elected to Manitoba school boards are able to fund local choices to meet the needs of their students? They have 2 minutes to answer that question, and we start with Dr. Gerrard.
Yeah, first of all, the answer is yes. We believe it's very important to respect school board autonomy in decision-making, including having some decision-making around finances. We've seen this recently in the debate that's gone back and forth in terms of Seven Oaks School Division. And the Seven Oaks School Division had not received enough funding, and they have decided that they want to keep critical programs, and the only way to do that is to raise taxes in that area, which they are going to do. Now, that's, of course, a step which the Conservative government has not liked, but nevertheless, that sort of autonomy is so critical. As I travel the province, it is really important that you have local school boards like yourselves, because you understand what's happening locally. You have a different mix of students, you have different needs. They come from different communities and different backgrounds, and we have to be able to adapt to that. We have to be able to make sure that no kids are falling through the cracks. And if we've got some school divisions where there's not kids coming to school, we need to make sure that we are having that emphasis so we not only get kids in school, but we make sure they have a good education.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Ewasko.
Do I get the 2 minutes, Michelle?
You get 2 minutes.
Thanks, Michelle. So the answer is yes as well. And I think what we've shown over the last few years, everyone, is the fact that we are an open and we're a listening government. And so I know that there's been some blips in the road. And myself, being a teacher, this coming fall will have started my 29th year teaching, not quite as long as my wonderful colleague from Transcona. But I do know the importance of local voice. And we did hear loud and clear from not only all of you, but Manitobans, that we should be reconsidering or getting rid of Bill 64. And we did that. And so when Premier Stephenson came on board, basically we withdrew the bill. And yes, absolutely, it came from consultations and having open and at times difficult conversations with MASBA and many of you in this room. So I want to make sure that this is perfectly clear, that coming forward, we continue to have the doors are open, to have those conversations with each and every one of you, making sure that at the end of the day, not only are we being fiscally responsible, but also socially responsible as well. And as I said in my opening comments, to make sure that at the end of the day, student-centered is the main focus. Your autonomy to make your decisions with the amounts of money that the government provides you is going to stay in your hands. Just recently, I believe it was as early as yesterday, the member to my left, properly situated, had made a couple comments about that I should be directing you to make sure where those funds are going. I'm a big believer on making sure that you're going to get the basket of funding. You represent your communities, you represent your local schools. Make sure that you are making those decisions. That's what you're elected to do, to make sure you're making those decisions for the best of your school communities and those students that are in those schools. Because I know many of you are representing rural school divisions as well, and you've got many challenges. I know that. Almost got the bell.
Thank you, Mr. Ewasko. And the last 2 minutes of this question is to Mr. Altomare.
Thank you, Michelle. Last time I looked, you're elected officials, correct? Correct. When you're an elected official, you have autonomy, correct? Correct. That means you also have autonomy over your budgets and over deciding what is important in your local communities. One thing we will never do is step on that autonomy because it's important. That's why we have school boards in Manitoba. Manitoba is a unique province in this country, and in many ways leads the country in this, what's in front of us right here, the people that are making decisions that impact kids that are in your neighborhoods. I will tell you, with Bill 64 and what this person over here espoused with Bill 64 was to take that away from local communities, to take that decision making and throw it out the door, and to discredit the work that is being done at local communities and put it in the hands of a provincial education authority that would have been blank to the needs of rural Manitoba, of neighborhoods in Winnipeg, of Brandon East, of Swan Valley, of Flin Flon. What you really need, and what we're going to ensure you get, is a real partner walking with you on that path. Because like I said earlier in my opening statement, we are at an inflection point right now. When a government decides to put money into a place that shows you where their priorities are. You know where the priority is. It's for your kids and communities. And what you need is a government partner that understands that and provides the necessary resources so that you can do that. And we do that together by having dialogue. And that dialogue's a two-way street. Also, the last time I looked, we have one mouth and 2 ears.
Annabelle.
Meaning that we listen more than we talk.
Thank you, Mr. Altomare. Now we have rebuttals, and each candidate will, each member up here will have a rebuttal for 1 minute, and these were randomly drawn, and Mr. Altomare has the pleasure of being up first.
Oh, you should have just let him keep going for the whole minute.
Well, yes and no.
Thank you, Michelle. You know, I was up in debate yesterday in the House, and we were debating BITSA, the Budget Implementation and Tax Statutes Act, that outlines the government's priorities. What do we see with their priorities? Well, we see an ed tax rebate that disproportionately favors the wealthy. And they double down on that to the point where they're sending money out of the province to billion-dollar corporations. Instead, we have Lakeshore School Division, like many of the rural school divisions here, facing this question. I got to find $180,000 to buy a bus. Cadillac Fairview's getting $2 million. I know where our priorities would have been. It wouldn't have been $2 million. It would have been sent to school divisions like you.
Thank you, Mr. Altomare. That 1 minute does tend to go by fast. The next minute goes to Mr. Ewasko.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, everyone. And just to add to the plans that we've put into place, which was developed by all of you who have a seat on each and every committee that we have in the Department of Education. So your voices are more than being heard on a pretty much a daily basis, as opposed to what was going on under the previous NDP government, and I would fathom to say that probably under a Liberal government as well. How many people in here own homes? And do you consider yourselves these wealthy people that the NDP are saying? We are funding education at above inflation. You can check out the numbers. The funds are coming from government to the tune of 80% of funds are coming from government. We are working with you, and the taking the education tax off of property absolutely is a promise that we made and a promise kept. They promised to not raise the PST, and they did, not only the PST, but on other 24 other taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Ewasko. And the last minute rebuttal is from Dr. Gerrard.
Yeah, in the question, there was mention of where we are now, which is 80% provincial funding and 20% from school boards and education tax. That's a position that we have advocated for some time. We see that as a position which could be stayed stable. We also see that there's a need to move from annual funding to multi-year funding, so you can plan better as school boards. We think we need to move beyond debating past issues, and we need to provide a vision for the future, and we need to be able to be sure that you have the resources and some critical areas, particularly to move forward and have a vision for what we really can do in education, which is so critically important for all of Manitoba. Thank you.
Okay, that was question number 1. We move on to question number 2, and this will be coming from the school superintendents, Mass. The public school system, so I'll give the background part first. The public school system continues to navigate the many ongoing impacts of the pandemic while also responding to other societal and economic pressures, such as inflation, demographic dynamics, growing economic distress, and declining mental health. The school system needs stability, certainty, and predictability. Question: which 3 priorities would be foundational to you as we respond to the public school system's greatest areas of need? In your response, if you can speak to how these priorities would be identified, what would be the process moving forward, and if you have time within your 2 minutes to elaborate on any specific ideas that you feel would add stability, certainty, and predictability. So, 2 minutes. We'll start with Dr. Gerrard.
I've already mentioned the need to have multi-year funding so that we can, in fact, have everybody can plan better. I think that's important. I think that there are some issues which came up during COVID, for example, ventilation, which need to be addressed, and there needs to be major provincial funding to make sure that every school in this province has ventilation addressed. There are concerns about lead in water in some schools. We need to make sure that that is all tested for, and where there's a problem, that's addressed. But I spoke earlier on about the need to make sure that we are not having kids falling through the gaps. And this is, as I see it, critical, because those kids who fall through the cracks not only struggle in school, but they go on to struggle in life, very often have difficulties, which become societal difficulties and expensive for all of us. So we need to fill those gaps in. We need also to make sure that every student is in school, because unless they're in school, they can't be learning. And sometimes that is innovative programming, sometimes that is working with individuals who are skilled in going out and meeting with families. But let's make sure that every child is in school and that there's no child falling behind.
Thank you, Dr. Gerrard. Next, 2-minute response to that question, Mr. Ewasko.
Thank you, Mass, for the question. So there's to nail all this down in 2 minutes is going to be a little tough, but here we go. So as you all know, the funding model has been, you have all been part of groups that have been screaming for a new funding model for well over 20 years. And I had experience working within Sunrise School Division and Agassiz prior to that, and there were discussions about the funding model. And so that's why we're having those consultations and the work going forward on the funding model to make sure that it's fair and equitable, and making sure that we're hitting some of those points that I know that some school divisions are experiencing some challenges as opposed to some others. And that's some of the not only demographic, but also the family situations, transportation issues, and all of that being said, it's unfortunate that Mr. Gerrard, as in regards to long-term multi-year funding, it's pretty tough to do in the way that the fiscal year's set up, where the provincial funding is from April 1st to March 31st, and school divisions are of course, you guys all know, on the school year. So that piece is a little bit tough, but that's where we're working towards making sure that we're increasing funding to special needs. And you've seen that over the last 3 years, $17 million to go to special needs. A lot of these things, I think, should have and could have been put in place far earlier than this. And I'm talking multi years. We've listened. We're putting forward plans. We're having these plans with you about a vision for the future. In addition to that, we're building 20 new schools. Mr. Gerrard mentions ventilation. We're talking about capital. We're talking about deferred maintenance. These things aren't sexy photo op opportunities, and I think that's why the NDP never did it. But we need to make sure that the capital is there so that we can make sure that our existing infrastructure are there for not only today but into the future. Sorry, reach for the bell.
Yep, thank you. And we will finish the answer to this question with Mr. Altomare with his 2 minutes.
Thank you, Michelle. I just want to open by saying that when we're elected officials, we're given the awesome responsibility of stewardship over our system. You know that. The first thing that we would do is ensure that there's a funding formula that makes sense. How does that make sense? Because we notice Manitoba is a very diverse province. Let's have a funding formula that accounts for urban schools, rural schools, and northern schools, and have it different, so because of all the different challenges that are in each one of those. Number 2, how about a nutrition program that feeds every kid in the province that needs to be fed? That's a second priority. And number 3, and you know this too, is ensuring that our kids have the necessary resources so that they can succeed at school. My colleague, Dr. Gerrard, mentioned kids that are neurodiverse. That is an absolute challenge. So we have to ensure that we have funds in place for kids with additional needs so that they're supported at school, not supported outside of school by a parent that has to spend extra dollars for their kid to go for tutoring because they don't have time at the school because they're stretched. Stretched why? Because of decisions made by this current government. We know that. We see that every day. I saw it in 1986 when I started. I can tell you the supports that were available to me at that time when I left in 2018 were more varied and reliable. And right now we have a challenge here in this room to respond, like I said earlier, because we are at an inflection point. We are in the pandemic's shadow. And right now what you have is you have a government that is showing what its priorities are. Their priorities are to send tax breaks to people that don't require them. Meanwhile, we have the need of our kids, families, and communities staring them right in the face. They made the choice, and you have to live with it. And like I said earlier, when you're given the awesome responsibility of government, you need to ensure that everybody is properly resourced.
Thank you. Those were the answers to the questions. Now we have the 1 minute rebuttals. So we will start with Dr. Gerrard. 1 minute.
First of all, Wayne Ewasko has mentioned that it would be tough to do multi-year funding. Well, I say to you that we are elected as politicians, and we're elected to take on tough chances. We will put it in place. It may not be easy, but that's our commitment to you. Second, we've got children. I was talking with one of your school trustees from the PA. There's no psychological help there. There's not enough internet access for everybody. We'll make sure that psychological therapies are included under Medicare so that kids can get those services quickly and when they need them without having to pay sometimes the exorbitant costs that they're being asked to pay right now. And we'll make sure that there is the internet access so that schools are not tied down without the infrastructure they need to succeed.
Next up for his 1 minute rebuttal is Mr. Altomare.
Thanks again, Michelle. Right now in the province of Manitoba, we have challenges that are facing us that require action. The people that know schools the best are here in this room. I know you've met with the minister. I know that you have presented the challenges to the minister that you're facing. I know you've done this now for 6 years. And what have you received? Inadequate support. To the point where you're making impossible decisions, whether or not to get that bus serviced. We have Borderland School Division that is making the impossible decision now, right now, of removing 20 EA supports from their schools. That's shameful. Right now, we have many school divisions that have to make the impossible choices of letting go teachers and support staff. So when the minister says that they're providing support, you're feeling the type of support that they're providing.
Thank you. And for the last rebuttal, for 1 minute, Mr. Ewasko.
Thanks, Michelle. So my two colleagues to the left of me have made a few points, and I need to stress to all of you, and you all know this. It is tough to govern. It absolutely is. It's easy to criticize. But I'll tell you, they're hoping that you all have some short memories. They mentioned the funding formula. 17 years in power, not one movement on the funding formula. We're doing it. It's not an easy task. It's complicated. You all know it's complicated. You've got secretary treasurers working with you. There's many factions that have to be considered. That's why we are working on it with you. We've committed to having one-on-one school division communications and consultations with you, and we're going to be doing that. We've been asked by some of you in the room to pause that funding model review. We've paused it till after budget. We're going to be getting down to work. Nutrition program, 2006, $1.2 million by the NDP. Not one iota of a movement. We've more than doubled that money. There's more to do. Again, elections coming up. There is more good news coming out.
Thank you. We will now move to question number 3. Their third question is coming from Manitoba Teachers Society. The shortage of certified substitutes was perhaps the most understated crisis in public education until the COVID-19 pandemic brought it into the spotlight. Post-pandemic, the need for certified substitutes has grown as teachers struggle with crushing workloads and increased stress, resulting in absences. The lack of certified substitutes also means a loss of prep time and the ability to participate in professional learning and development. Put simply, certified substitute teachers are an essential part of education. The question: what is your plan for ensuring a healthy supply of certified substitute teachers in Manitoba? 2 minutes. First up, Dr. Gerrard.
First of all, it's important to recognize that certified substitutes are really important. Our school system wouldn't run without having certified substitute teachers, and so we need to be considering them as an important part of our whole system. In my view, that the first thing that needed is that we need to improve the funding for certified substitutes, because I think that is one of the critical things in terms of getting people involved. Now we're talking about many times we've got people who are retired teachers, luring them back, getting them feeling that they're going to be in an exciting place, in a worthwhile place, contributing as substitute teachers. Some substitute teachers are younger, but they are also then getting into and moving and becoming full-time teachers. And one of the things that we need to do is review some of the supports that we have for substitute teachers. I think that we can help them when they walk into the classroom be a little bit prepared in terms of knowing what's happening in the classroom, where the students are, what sort of things that they can do in particular that will help move those students along in their learning journey. So I think that improving the environment, improving the funding support for substitute teachers, these are two critical elements, and I think if people feel that they can make a difference as a substitute teacher, that's an important part of it. So we work hard on doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gerrard. For the next 2 minutes, we have Mr. Ewasko.
Thank you. Teachers and substitute teachers and making sure that those classrooms continue to roll and the students keep getting in there so that they keep getting an education. This has been a struggle, and I know that my colleague to the left of me would attest to this as well. This has been a struggle for quite some time. Absolutely. Prior to 2011, when I was first elected as an MLA, we were having troubles getting substitute teachers. So I applaud those of you in the room, and I'm not going to cherry pick certain school divisions all across the province as my colleagues are doing, but some of you are being innovative. You're asking community members to come and help out. We want to make sure that our kids are safe. But what I need to inform you of, because again, they're hoping that you all have short memories. We've come up with a plan. It's called the Skills, Talent, Knowledge Strategy. That's working with our partners. That's working with our post-secondary institutions to make sure that their programming is more flexible and nimble to be able to see, what does Manitoba need? Well, Manitoba needs teachers. So we need to increase the amount of seats at post-secondary institutions. We need to become more flexible, and we need to increase, as we have done, our scholarships and bursaries to make sure that those students don't have to wait till tax season after they're done all their post-secondary. We get them in the door with upfront scholarships and bursaries. That's what we have done. That's what we're going to do, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And again, working alongside you guys.
Thank you. And our last one, Mr. Altomare, 2 minutes.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to cherry pick a school division, River East Transcona. I'll tell you, I retired in December of 2018. I was given a phone call in early January by my good friend Margaret. Nello, can you come into my school? We need you. Absolutely. It's the first thing I did when I left teaching. Why? Because it's important. Teachers know that. Teachers are committed to not only their kids' families and communities, they're also committed to each other, to supporting each other, to making sure that they're there for them. And what now, like I said earlier, I talked about an inflection point. We need to, when we reach these points, think outside the box. So what do? Right now in university, we have many pre-service teachers that could use the experience in school, that can be brought in to substitute. Of course, with the mentorship of another person there, either through the faculty or the school, so that we can get these positions filled and covered, so that we don't have teachers run off their feet every day trying to provide the service, the very necessary services that our kids need. That's what we're talking about. We have to be innovative. The times demand innovation. And it's not just me coming up with these ideas. It's everybody, even on this podium, sitting down with you so that we can get this done in an expeditious fashion that's going to be safe and that's going to serve the needs of our communities. That's what we need to do. We have to be innovative. We're demanded to do that. That's why we're elected. So let's get going and let's get to work.
Thank you. And now for the 1-minute rebuttals, we will start with Mr. Ewasko.
So I'd just like to say to Mr. Altomare, thanks for giving us kudos for what we're doing. So we're working with you to make sure that we're making it available for those students that are in that pre-service teaching years within our school system, within our education system, to get in there, get their feet wet, get them in, make sure they've got the child abuse registry, make sure that they've got the criminal record checks done, and they are. They're being given those opportunities to work within the school systems. So thank you, Mr. Altomare, for congratulating us on working with you to getting that stuff done.
Okay, thank you. And the next rebuttal for 1 minute, Mr. Altomare.
Thank you. One thing that we'll never do is make education or healthcare a partisan issue. We just won't do that. What we'll do is we'll ensure that we're going to have the support necessary so that we can get the job done. That's all. That's it. Right now, we've had to endure 7 years of austerity. We've seen what it's gotten us. Unreliability, broken systems, and they're asking us now to, oh, you know what? Let's forget about that and give us another 4 years. I think you as trustees and school boards know what will happen when many of you right now are down to zero for your surplus funds. Why? Because you know the needs of your kids. They demand it, so you have to drain it because you're not getting support from this current government.
Thank you. And our final rebuttal from Dr. Gerrard. 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not keen on putting students in as substitute teachers because I think they need that close supervision and learning. I am keen on having students have more time in the classroom before they become full-time teachers. But I think that there are alternatives, and there are two that we can train more teachers. But in the immediate future, we have an opportunity to prioritize teachers among a profession where we can get more immigrants. We have a lot of people coming from Ukraine. We have people, and I've been dealing with them, who are teachers elsewhere. We could have courses which give those immigrant teachers who are qualified in their home country, which would give them an accelerated opportunity to get into the system, be substitute teachers, learn how they're doing, and it would be a good way to integrate and involve more people when we have this kind of an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Participants, we will now move to question number 4. This question will be coming from MASBO, the Manitoba Association of School Business Officials. Many school buildings across the province were built to meet the needs of an education system from several generations in the past. Ongoing needs to maintain and improve this aged infrastructure continue to increase to meet modern requirements relating to accessibility, quality learning environments, and expanded child care spaces. Question: what is your party's plan to address current and growing deficits in capital support to school divisions without negatively impacting adequate and sustainable operating funding? 2 minutes. We will start with Mr. Ewasko.
Great. Thank you, Masbo, for that question. In regards to capital, as I've mentioned or alluded to a little bit earlier, we talk about ventilation, we talk about aging infrastructure. We know that for many, many years, 17 plus years under the previous government, the capital was not spent. And again, it was because those roof repairs, the fascia of schools, ventilation, all those things are not sexy ribbon-cutting announcements, and that's what they were all about. We're making sure that the 5-year plan, we're spending over $984 million, which has already been invested in education, with an additional almost 3 billion planned over the next 3 years. We talk about new schools. We're building 20 plus new schools, and if you tune in next week, please tune in. Some of you already know about this, but there's going to be a huge announcement next week where we're making sure that each and every one of those new schools has a new daycare attached to it of 74, minimum of 74 spaces. We're making sure that we have the childcare spaces, but in the same time, we're making sure that we've got the staff to put in there as well. Plus, all of you know this. Oh no, I better not say this yet. We'll tune in next week for that. But we are looking at expanding existing schools as well and making sure that we have spaces, those childcare spaces close to the schools for easy transition. I do have to give kudos to my leader, the present Premier, Heather Stephenson, for amalgamating the two departments, bringing in the K-12 system with the early childhood education system. It just makes sense of ease of transition for those students 0 to 5 right into the K-12 system.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ewasko. We'll now turn it to Mr. Altomare for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Michelle. Record revenue coming into the province this year from 3 main sources. The federal government through equalization and transfer, Manitoba Hydro through record revenue, and income taxes. Here is a point where we're at, where a decision was made. Instead of taking that record revenue and eliminating every one of the deferred maintenance projects that you deal with on a daily basis, that's where that money could have been directed very easily. That decision could have been made so that you can improve that ventilation system, so that you can finally tackle that roof project, just like the minister has said. Again, these are choices that a government makes. What has this government chosen to do? Send the money outside the province instead of investing it in our youth, investing it into quality buildings where kids get a quality education. This was a choice that was made. And we did have record revenue this year. Again, an opportunity was presented to this government to use that revenue in a way that would build community. They didn't take that opportunity. Instead, they did something else. And now we're at a point where, in many school divisions, deferred maintenance is so far down the list, they can't even begin to tackle it because of the lack of support. So when presented with an opportunity like this that was given to them, they chose not to do it. And here we are.
Thank you. And for 2 minutes, Dr. Gerrard.
I think we have to start by recognizing that if you do maintenance when it needs to be done, then your buildings are going to have a longer lifespan. And if you don't do that maintenance, then you're going to have set up for big costs down the road. And so this has to be a priority. I believe that issues with healthcare are critical, that there shouldn't be delays in getting addressed on ventilation, on correcting problems with lead in the water, or correcting problems with radon levels being high. I believe that there are some things which are absolutely essential for today's schooling, and that is things like adequate internet access, that we've got to make sure that schools are up to date in terms of being able to provide the best that's possible. The maintenance itself can't be something that is just delayed and delayed. It has to be a regular part of the planning. We can't tolerate the sort of system which we had for a number of years, where there was just trailers being put up here and there rather than having schools constructed. We think that the childcare situation should not just address those schools which are new, but we also need to make sure that there's childcare available at or nearby schools which are older. There's a lot that needs to be done, but it shouldn't be a matter of deferring maintenance, because that's not the answer, and it's an expensive answer, because when you defer it, you end up with bigger costs down the line. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now turn to the rebuttals. For 1 minute, Mr. Altomare.
It's kind of funny to rebuttal at this point because it's really, we've heard all of our I think, a desire to get this done. Like I said earlier in my previous comments, a choice was made not to get it done, despite record revenue. Here we are, still having the same debate. And these are important issues right now because, like I said, I've said this a lot during this time on stage. You're elected to make these decisions. You need the resources so that you can go ahead and get the jobs done. And right now you don't have them. Why? Because you don't have a real partner in the provincial government that's walking alongside you. That's what needs to change. Identify the issues now so that we can tackle them together and get the jobs done for our kids, our families, and our communities.
Thank you. Rebuttal for 1 minute, Mr. Ewasko.
1 minute, here we go. Many of you are new. Please look back in the history books that he's absolutely not necessary. He's putting some misinformation on here. $2.2 billion on deferred maintenance. We work with you. You submit your 5-year capital plans to the province. We work with you. $2.2 billion. Previous 5 years, upcoming 5 years. New schools. We have 23 new schools. That's no secret. 20 new schools coming up. That's in addition to the capital spending that we're doing on deferred maintenance. That's in addition to the 23 new childcare centers that we're building in rural and northern development, in northern and rural communities, partnering with municipalities, partnering with school divisions, making sure that we're getting this done. The NDP.
Oh, you're a good
I'll get
listener.
it there later.
Okay. Rebuttal for 1 minute, Dr. Gerrard.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting looking back during COVID, because I see organizations which were thinking ahead and organizations which sat on their situation. And the organizations which were thinking ahead said, you know, the buildings are not occupied at the moment. We don't have students. We're going to have a major push to do the deferred maintenance because now's the opportune time. The organizations which were thinking ahead said, we need a lot of training done. We've got people who are sitting at home because they can't go to work. We'll do a lot of that training. We need to start thinking and planning ahead much better than we have. We lost an opportunity in many ways during COVID to do some of that, but we have to leave that behind where we are now, and we need to make sure that we don't get behind in the way that we have the planning that we need.
Those minutes go by fast.
Those minutes go by fast. We move to the final question of the day, our 5th question, coming from the Manitoba Association of Parent Councils, MAPC. A little bit of background. Section 4.1 of the Education Administration Act serves to recognize MAPC as the legal representative of English school-based parent groups in Manitoba, including parent advisory councils and parent councils. Nevertheless, in 2019, the legally mandated annual meeting between the Minister of Education and MAPC was stricken from the Public Schools Act without consultation. Further, when speaking with parents and parent groups, we know that the relationship between parents, schools, and communities has deteriorated. Notwithstanding the 2005 document, School Partnerships, a guide for parents, schools, and communities. This resource provided important guidance to these partners in how to work together. In view of the importance of promoting and protecting parents' voice in public education, should your party become elected or re-elected to serve as government? The question, what steps will you take to support the role of MAPC in representing parent councils and parent advisory councils, as well as the parent voice? How will your government honor MAPC's legal status and recognition going forward? 2 minutes. We start with Mr. Altomare.
Thank you, Michelle. With MAPC, MAPC is a really important organization, one that works with you in the room here, works quite closely, and brings a voice that sometimes isn't heard, right? Because you're dealing with the big picture. MAPC has that really unique piece of being that intermediary between you and their child or other parent groups. And that's a very important role. A role that really is sometimes underestimated, and one that really needs to be cultivated and supported. And the way you do that is through dialogue, is through scheduled meetings, and is through coming up with shared priorities. That's how you do it. This is how we then have everyone's voice at the table. It's a really important piece. I remember being, as a school administrator, one of the most important relationships for me was with my parent council chair. We would talk all the time. That was the person that knew the news on the street and got it to me so that I could plan for it, so that I could actually put in place some of the pieces that they were bringing forward. It was a very important relationship. And you know, one of the first things they did, one of the first parent councils I ever worked with, they said, you know, Mr. Altomare, we need to make sure our kids are fed here at this school. That parent council took care of our nutrition program before there was the Child Nutrition Council. Visionary. These are pieces, resources in our community that we need to value. And I trusted them because they knew they could come to our door, or my door as a principal, and be heard. We will continue that.
Thank you. 2 minutes, Dr. Gerrard.
Yeah, the parent councils play a vital role, some more active than others, but nevertheless very important. We have at the moment something like 17 to 20 schools on the waiting list to get the Manitoba Child Nutrition Council funding. Parents can play an important role in helping advocate for their school to make sure that they have that funding. We have some school divisions where there are alternative high school programs for students who learn differently. Parents often play a vital role in advocating for having that access for kids who learn differently, who are neurodiverse for one reason or another. In the Seine River School Division at the moment, they have for the last year had an arrangement with the students, initiated by the students, where a standing committee of the trustees meets with the students regularly, and the students lead this process and bring forward ideas. It seems to be working astonishingly well. It gets students involved. Parents can be involved with their students in helping them to play a larger role in what's happening in the school and making suggestions. There was a presentation, I understand, yesterday from the Seine River School Division to this meeting, and I think that it's the sort of thing that parents can be on lookout for things that are happening. Parents can make an extraordinary difference. We need to encourage them and make sure that they're doing what they can, working with their children to influence and improve our schools.
Thank you. And for 2 minutes, Mr. Ewasko.
Thank you, and thanks to MAPSI for the question. So MAPSI would like some more voice. MAPSI would like more voice. MAPSI would like more voice. I am meeting with them, and so to MAPSI, who's in the audience, and I'm looking around, and many of you wear those parents' hats as well. Many of you have worked on various different school initiatives representing your parent councils, because as you all know, not only as elected officials, it takes a lot of time also to volunteer. And we all know within our communities, when you're volunteering, whether it's on a parent council, whether it's on a local extracurricular or community group, we all know that those really good volunteers are pulled in multiple different directions. So in regards to making sure that the meetings with MAPSI are happening, those are happening. I can't 100% speak to, as of right now, why it was taken out, but those meetings continue multiple times, much like many of the other great organizations, associations that are here today. We don't just have one-a-year meetings. We really don't. And it is about getting together as education partners and making sure that we're moving things forward to make sure that all students are receiving that success. And again, not just in Winnipeg, all over this great province of ours. So that's my 2 cents on that. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you. Now we move to rebuttals, and we start with the 1 minute with Mr. Ewasko.
Great. Well, here we go. I could have just kept rolling. So Manitoba Manitoba Association for Parent Councils. Again, as my colleagues I think alluded to, I think we all agree on how important parent councils are. But I also think that those parent councils have to be working with you, Manitoba school boards, but also within those school communities. And I think it's up to school boards, not only the Department of Education, of course not, because you know each and every one of yours communities and schools within your communities. And you know which schools have strong parent councils and which do not. So I think it's imperative that we continue to work together and listen to those parents within your schools to maybe help them along as well on getting a school parent council going in the school, a strong parent council. They can't just be called upon to raise money for the new play structure outside, selling cupcakes.
Wow. Selling cupcakes.
Next up,
Wow.
Mr. Rebuttals. Rebuttal from Mr. Altomare. 1 minute.
I heard the bell.
You know, this is what's happened here in this province. The trust relationship between this government and with school boards and parent councils have been absolutely shattered and broken, to the point where we make a comment like selling cupcakes. How insulting, the work that is done by parent councils. You know, this is the issue here. Like I said earlier in my very first comments, we are at an inflection point. It's time that we support the organizations that are here to support kids. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And we will have a rebuttal for 1 minute. Dr. Gerrard.
Yeah, parents are involved with their kids, sometimes a lot more, sometimes a lot less, but they're critically important because we need a holistic approach to these kids in the sense that teachers and school boards are partners with parents. I meet parents who have a lot of innovative ideas when they're listened to, have some very useful suggestions, and I really believe that any avenue that can give parents a better say, a better way of getting ideas in, and parents working not just alone but with their kids to make a difference and find solutions.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our questions. We will be moving to the final closing statements. Each participant will have 2 minutes for their closing statement. And we will be starting with Mr. Altomare.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you, everybody, for this opportunity to be here today to share our vision for the province, to share our vision for public education here in Manitoba. The public good, right? That's why we're elected. We're here to be stewards of a public good like public education. It is so vitally important. I remember my first day of school. I didn't speak English. I walked into Central School unable to speak English, but was supported all the way through by great teachers and a great school division that put me on a pathway to success that I have always, always respected and honored. Absolutely. And I can tell you the people that supported that school division at the time took great pride in seeing their kids get on that pathway to success so that they not only can graduate but contribute to their communities. Being part of something bigger than themselves, providing that opportunity, ensuring that not only did they have success, but also their kids and also that neighbor down the block, right? Because we all cared for each other. We all had that one thing that we understood, and that's community. And in being part of a community, the important piece is trust. Ask yourself right now, after 7 years of austerity, do you trust this government to support public education like it needs to? I think you know the answer. If you don't, reflect on it for a bit. Absolutely. Because these are important decisions that we're facing right now. I will tell you that we will build that trust relationship, and I will be at that table ensuring that public education is fully supported and properly resourced. I can't imagine what their conversation must be like at their caucus table when they have a teacher there who has to fight. And I'm almost sure that the minister is fighting, but it's fallen on deaf ears. I can tell you right now, you know that the deficit since the cumulative effect of inflation from 2016 is over $200 million, just to get back to then. But we will work with you and build that trust relationship again. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the afternoon.
Thank you. For his final closing statement, Dr. Gerrard.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for what you do as school trustees. Education is extraordinarily important, not only for each individual child, but for our province and our society as a whole. And I'm going to use part of this time to talk about the kids who fall through the cracks. Because as an MLA, every day in what I do, I'm helping adults who've got autism or ADHD or learning disabilities, which were not adequately addressed. And they are struggling as adults. They are struggling holding down a job. They are struggling with addictions. They are struggling with mental health issues. They are struggling, sometimes involved with the criminal justice system. And we can make a difference for these kids. And I think you as school boards have the potential to play an important leadership role in making sure kids don't fall through the cracks. Because we have tremendous examples of how kids who are neurodiverse can do extraordinary things. You know, from Picasso to Churchill to many leading business people who have just been helped enough with their dyslexia or their other problems that they manage to make it through. And partly because they take up the challenge and they do well, they can succeed. But we need to watch out for them and help them. We don't want to call them lazy. We need to recognize what it is. We can make an extraordinary difference in this province, I believe. We will support education adequately. We'll make sure we've got the substitute teachers that we need. We'll make sure that the quality of education is good, but particularly that we don't have kids falling through the cracks. There are too many now. Thank you.
And the final closing statement, Mr. Ewasko. 2 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for the invitation to participate in the first 2023 election debate as we move forward. And I have to thank my party for giving me the nod to be able to get here and represent our party. The other members next to me mentioned for the first time success, trust, and money. Success. Fact is, when the previous government took over in the early 2000s, we were third in the country in numeracy and literacy. In 2014, under their watch, we were 10th and further behind 9th. We are making sure that we have plans working with you, the K-12 Commission, the K-12 Action Plan, Mama Tuwisuin. Our priorities are numeracy, literacy, and Indigenous education and inclusion. We want to make sure that we have success for all students in this great province of ours. We want to make sure that we are instilling the trust not only from you guys, but to our students and to our parents. They are our futures. The members talk about student services. I was in student services for 12 of my 17 years, working with great student services teams, not only in our school division, but across the province. I know you're all out there. I know that you're all working hard for each and every student on a day-to-day basis. We know that our government, as opposed to what the other members have said, have increased education funding to 23% since 2016. That's a fact. The numbers don't lie. It is there. But working with you, you are part of each and every committee working with our department, in addition to meeting with myself. I want to thank you for the afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your conference. We'll see you in about an hour.
Okay,
Or
we have
15 minutes.
We have 3 thank yous here. Thanks to the 5 hosts for having this Provincial Forum on K-12 education and supplying the questions. Thank you to our participants for being here, and thank you for all of you for attending. This forum has drawn to a close. Thank you.